Look, I'll be quite candid with you. All of television, media, and what we do here, it's been thrown into something which is deeply moving and troubling, the death of Nelson Mandela. So we're rather thinking on our feet here. A great friend of mine, Ray Hurd, who is moved. I mean, I can see how emotional you are. It's just occurred. Your family's attachment, closeness, proximity to Nelson Mandela is extraordinary.
I've known him since I was a 20-year-old reporter on the Liberal Rand Daily Mail, and he was in the trial. He was in the dock for treason. Fortunately, in a later trial, an Afrikaner judge had the choice of hanging him or sentencing him to life. That judge, Becker, changed human history. Mandela lived. I saw him 3 or 4 years ago, just before Christmas, and he said I could say this, what I'm telling you now. At the end of our conversation, and he went back to his boyhood, and he remembered me. He remembered my late father, too, who was murdered by the pro-Nazis in South Africa. But I asked him at the end, and my brother was with me, who was his aide, I said, Madiba, which is what we call him, why did you forgive your enemy? And he said, because that's what the Christian missionaries, Methodists actually, taught me was the Christian thing to do. He never mentioned Jesus Christ. He was a great man. He was a very fallible man. He was married 3 times. He was very handsome. He was a good boxer. He loved sport. He did not agree with what we called multiculturalism. He called it multiracialism. He was against it. He thought people should not be hyphenated Canadians or South Africans. They should just be South Africans. I've done some bad things in my life. One of the good things I did, maybe the only good thing, I was responsible for making him the first living person to be made an honorary citizen of Canada. I also had the idea of giving him and his 3rd wife honorary degrees at Ryerson University, the most multicultural
What have they done to deserve that?
No, because it's multicultural. And I'm very sad today. He lived longer, by the way, than any other statesman I can think of. 95, Churchill, Gerald Ford, I think, was the oldest former American president.
Hardly to be 92. Mentioned in the same breath. Before you go on, because I want you to get you, because I can see how moved you are by this. Now, let's play a clip of President Zuma talking about this. Can we see that now, please?
We saw in him what we seek in ourselves. And in him, we saw so much of ourselves. Fellow South Africans, Nelson Mandela brought us together, and it is together that we will bid him farewell.
I want to say something. You briefly mentioned it, right? People need to know. Your father was a martyr in the fight against apartheid. Your father was senior naval intelligence officer, helped to bring South Africa into the war against the Nazis. Many Afrikaners didn't want that. At the end of the war, he was murdered by the Volkswagen Guard, by pro-apartheid neo-Nazis.
Pro-Nazis, and they wouldn't give my mother, who, by the way, was quite beautiful and journalist, they wouldn't give her a pension. Guess what Mandela did when he became president? He gave her a retroactive pension. But just let me say something about how Mandela felt about Canada. When I was a young reporter, I came to Canada from South Africa after going to Harvard. Diefenbaker threw South Africa out of the Commonwealth because of its racism. Mandela put South Africa back in the Commonwealth. He loved Canadians. We collected lots of money for the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund in Canada.
Something you were telling me beforehand, and I was with you when you heard the news, the relationship between Nelson Mandela and the Queen.
Yes, he visited the Queen. I can reveal that her aides, who don't say much, actually said in my presence that she was literally smitten to meet such a great man. His funeral, Michael, will be the biggest funeral in human history. I think Mandela will, I think Obama will show up, the Chinese who are buying up Africa will. And one of the big questions is, who represents the Commonwealth? I don't think the Queen has ever been to a funeral. Maybe Churchill's, I don't remember. There's a possibility. but it's unlikely. But the other question I'd like to raise publicly tonight, Brian Mulroney has to represent Canada at the funeral. Mulroney, as people can read in his memoirs, fought Reagan and Thatcher over the need for sanctions against South Africa. And he should go, and I hope he does go.
Now, it is too early for much of a deconstruction of his achievements. I think his greatest achievement was him, a man of enormous grace who said, I forgive. But I have to ask, what happens now? Because we cannot pretend as serious journalists that South Africa is in a good state right now.
No, but the Americans had a civil war some 70, 80 years later. The British, as you know, as a student of British history, after Cromwell, the Lord Protector, most revolutions have violent aftermaths. I don't think South Africa will have anything as bad as the American Civil War, or the Spanish Civil War, or the British Civil War, or certainly the upheavals that Mao and Stalin and Lenin gave Russia and China. It's not going to be an easy course for South Africa, but if they listen to Mandela's words, Mandela believed in what he called a rainbow society, one united South Africa. If they listen to his words, they may be inspired not to go the way of so many other countries in the post-revolutionary period. And I could have mentioned, by the way, Napoleon, but let's move on.
Last question. There are some corrupt politicians. They couldn't fill his shoes in a million years. But there are one or two people who I would like to see leading the country. Who would you like to see coming forward to lead South Africa?
The Cape Province, which has a lot of French Huguenots, and the most beautiful people on earth, the Cape Coloreds, who are half-caste, they call them. The Cape has a leader, Helen Zille, who happens not to be non-white. She's a chance, but it's too early to know. But they have to live his method. Don't talk about his message. Live his message. Those are my final words. It's a very disturbing time for me because I heard it on the air, literally.
Ray, thank you, my friend. Thank you for coming in because I'm going to try and get you out sort of surreptitiously. So we hear you moving around. Please, thank you. Thank you so much. Bless you. Bless you.